All right, picture this. It's the spring of 1945, right in the absolute teeth of the Pacific War. We're talking about the brutal, deafening final stages of World War II, one of the bloodiest, most chaotic conflicts in human history. The whole globe practically felt like it was on fire. Millions of men were shipped overseas, relentlessly trained to be, well, lethal weapons. But in this explainer, we're diving into a true story that totally flips the script on conventional combat. We're going to look at one guy who marched straight into this global inferno, stepped onto a literal blood-soaked battlefield, and just flat-out refused to carry a weapon. No rifle, no sidearm, nothing. Just empty hands. This is the unbelievable story of Desmond Doss, the soldier who wouldn't kill.
It's the kind of question that just stops you in your tracks, right? How on earth do you survive the deadliest war in history without a gun? I mean, think about the pure paradox here. You've got a soldier dropping into a horrific combat zone, a place literally designed for killing and surviving, armed with absolutely nothing but this deep-seated conviction to save lives. It sounds crazy. It sounds like a guaranteed death sentence. And yet, as we're going to see, Desmond Doss didn't just survive. He totally rewrote the book on what it actually means to be a hero on the front lines.
Chapter 1. The Weaponless Soldier. So, to really wrap our heads around this staggering decision, we gotta look at where he came from before the war even started. Desmond Doss was born in Virginia back in 1919, and his entire worldview was shaped by a profound religious faith. He was a devout Seventh-day Adventist. Now, while other kids might have been, playing war in the backyard and dreaming of medals, Desmond was taking the biblical commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," totally literally. It wasn't just some nice guideline for him, it was an unbreakable, ironclad law. He believed down to his absolute core that every single human life mattered. But then World War II explodes. The world is burning, and people are dying by the millions. Desmond absolutely feels this profound duty to serve his country, but, and here's the kicker, he flatly refuses to carry a rifle to do it.
You really have to look at the sheer contrast here. On one hand, your traditional soldier is basically molded by the military machine to be a lethal weapon, right? Trained to kill, trained to survive at all costs. But on the other hand, you have Desmond. He enlists in the army strictly as a combat medic, purely because he believes saving lives is fundamentally more important than taking them. Now you can imagine, to the military brass and all the guys standing next to him, volunteering for a massive global war without a weapon sounded absolutely insane. The military machine was definitely not built for a guy like him.
Chapter 2. Mocked by his own men.
Almost from day one of basic training, Desmond was a total outcast. The price he paid for his conviction was steep, and the harassment, it was brutal, and it was relentless. His peers constantly mocked him. They called him a coward, a burden, a freak. And it wasn't just words either. Picture this. He'd kneel down to pray at night, and guys would actually hurl heavy combat boots at him in the pitch dark. He was physically beaten, constantly insulted. And it wasn't just the guys in the bunks next to him. His own commanders actively tried to break him. They tried forcing a rifle into his hands, and when that didn't work, they dangled the very real threat of a court-martial over his head to forcefully discharge him. One officer even straight up told him he wasn't fit to live among normal people. Ouch.
But despite all of this just immense, crushing pressure, Desmond's answer never changed. It was incredibly simple and totally unyielding. He just said, "I cannot do it before God." And honestly, this is absolutely crucial to take away from his story. True courage isn't always about charging headfirst into a machine gun nest. Sometimes, maybe a lot of times, it's about standing absolutely firm in your beliefs when your entire world, your friends, your bosses, literally everyone, turns against you. Desmond just never broke. And he wasn't doing it to be rebellious, He refused out of a pure, unshakable conviction.
Chapter 3. The Hacksaw Ridge Nightmare.
Okay, now we're moving into the terrifying crucible of the Battle of Okinawa. We're talking one of the absolute most horrific engagements of the entire war. Right at the center of this nightmare was the Maeda Escarpment. The troops, they just called it Hacksaw Ridge. And honestly, this wasn't just a hill. It was a sheer, 400-foot jagged rock face that basically acted as the gateway to the rest of the island. Taking this ridge was practically a suicide mission. The Japanese forces had set up this devastating gauntlet, overlapping machine gun fire, raining mortars, deadly snipers, and those hidden enemy tunnels. We're talking about an intricate, deeply fortified network of pillboxes carved right into the solid rock. It made a traditional infantry assault almost completely impossible. When American troops climbed that ridge, they stepped directly into concentrated chaos, bullets ripping through the air, guys falling left and right, just an absolute nightmare.
And right in the middle of this absolute slaughter,
Men are screaming for medics. Heavily armed infantry are pinned down, desperately grabbing for any cover they can find. But the medic, without a weapon, he just kept charging forward. I want you to picture this vividly. Desmond Doss, a guy with literally zero ability to shoot back, sprinting straight into a massive hail of enemy bullets. And not just once, over and over and over again. He's dragging wounded guys, bandaging up these catastrophic injuries under heavy fire, physically carrying soldiers out of the line of fire, all while the battlefield around him is basically turning into a living, breathing hell.
Chapter 4. Alone on the Ridge.
So let's look at the timeline here, because on May 5th, this battle turns into one of the most astonishing moments in military history. In the morning, the troops finally hit the top of that imposing cliff, but by the afternoon, the Japanese launch a massive counteroffensive. It is absolute chaos, with devastatingly heavy casualties tearing through the American lines. By dusk, the whole situation is completely untenable. A desperate, full-scale retreat is ordered. The ridge is officially lost. Hundreds of wounded American soldiers are left behind in the mud, and the grim reality is, anyone still up there is expected to die. The sun goes down, and Doss makes a miraculous choice. He disobeys the spirit of the retreat order. He stays behind, completely, utterly alone, up on top of Hacksaw Ridge, surrounded by pitch darkness, patrolling enemy squads, and dying American men. What he actually did next was just this grueling, agonizingly repetitive test of pure physical endurance. Step 1, he crawls through the mud and blood in the pitch black just to find a wounded guy. Step 2, he drags that soldier, sometimes literally under the light of exploding shells or enemy flares, all the way back to the edge of that sheer cliff. Step 3, he painstakingly lowers the guy down that massive 400-foot drop to safety. And get this incredible detail, he did this whole lowering process using a special double bowline knot that he'd accidentally learned back in training camp. He's tying these guys up securely and lowering them by hand one by one with bullets literally smacking into the dirt around him. Every single trip back to that edge could have been his last.
Through the total exhaustion, the absolute terror, and just the searing physical agony of hauling grown men around, Desmond kept whispering the exact same desperate prayer into the dark. Lord, help me get one more. That was it. That little phrase became his entire universe for the whole night. Just one more. One more life pulled back from the absolute brink. By the time the sun finally, mercifully came up, the sheer magnitude of what he had pulled off was almost impossible to wrap your head around. 75. That is the staggering approximate number of soldiers Desmond Doss rescued that night. And what's kind of amazing is that the Army initially estimated he saved about 100 men, but Doss, being the humble guy he was, claimed it was probably only 50, so they basically compromised on 75. He did it completely alone, and he did the whole thing without ever firing a single shot. No way!
Chapter 5. A Legacy of Lives Saved. The immediate impact of that night was this crazy, complete 180-degree shift from the U.S. military. The exact same men who had thrown boots at him in the dark, who called him a coward, who literally tried to get him kicked out of the Army, they were now calling him a hero. In fact, their reverence for him became so deep that these incredibly hardened combat veterans flat out refused to go back into battle unless Desmond came with them. Why? Because now they knew with absolute 100% certainty that if things went south, Desmond Doss was coming back for them, no matter what.
For his unbelievable actions on Okinawa, Desmond Doss became the first conscientious objector in American history to receive the Medal of Honor, the absolute highest military decoration you can get in the United States. President Harry Truman actually presented it to him personally. But it wasn't just about getting a piece of metal. This moment totally shattered the military stigma around conscientious objectors forever. It proved, once and for all, that extreme, incredible valor and deep pacifism could actually coexist right on a battlefield. And that respect went all the way up the chain of command. When Truman handed him the medal, he reportedly looked at this weaponless medic and told him, "I would rather have this honor than be president."
Which really brings us to our final thought here. In a world and a time totally consumed by violence and destruction, Desmond Doss proved that bravery doesn't always carry a weapon. He walked into the absolute deadliest conflict in human history armed with nothing but his faith, his courage, and an overwhelming compassion for his fellow man. And somehow, against literally all the odds, that was enough. It leaves us with a pretty powerful question to reflect on. If true strength isn't measured by how many lives you take, how many would you save? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope diving into the timeline of Desmond's incredible life give you a fresh perspective on what it means to be truly brave. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next one.